This winter, the UK's grid is under immense pressure.
At the moment, it's incredibly volatile.
A war in Ukraine. A squeeze on energy supplies.
The solution is gas.
The national grid has warned there could be blackouts.
If I can just do a little bit and it helps, that's everything for me.
Now, electricity, where it comes from, how it's distributed, and what happens when there isn't enough is on everyone's mind.
But we now need to double down on net zero.
It's a terrible argument unless you're willing to go back to pre-industrial days.
This is the story of what it takes to get power to UK homes and of what it takes to keep the lights on. In the wild, beautiful Shetland Islands, change is in the air. This is the site of the Viking onshore wind farm. Eventually there'll be 103 turbines here, enough to power all the homes on these islands and then some.
Well, Shetland is statistically the windiest place in the UK. If you can't build wind farms where the best wind resource is in the UK, then there's something wrong. So there's a 260-kilometre cable between Shetland and Caithness in the north of Scotland.
Aaron Priest has lived here all his life, and the shift to wind is a chance to leave the past behind.
Shetland has a very, very large carbon footprint as well. It's the centre of oil and gas production, and our power at the moment comes from fossil fuels. It is the future for Shetland, and it will provide great opportunities for future generations here.
Turbine parts arrive at the port, the shape of Shetland's next chapter and all part of the big business of wind power. The government has ambitious plans to more than quadruple the UK's wind capacity in the coming decade and decarbonise the UK's power generation completely by 2035. At a neighbouring site, already up and running, we climb a turbine to get a different view of what is to come. Earlier this year, UK wind power set records, generating over half of the UK's electricity. But the problem is, when the wind stops, these turbines stop producing electricity. And because we can't store renewable energy at the scale necessary yet, something else has to fill the gap.
In the kitchen, everything that I can switch off without it causing a problem to reset it, then I will do.
This winter, people like Wendy Hall, wrapped in her dressing gown while the boiler is off, are helping to match supply and demand.
Here we go.
She is taking part in something called the Demand Flexibility Service, a national grid scheme being used for the first time, which pays people to use less electricity at times of peak demand.
How much money have you managed to save?
Well, there's a 31p there. There is a 94p there, and there is a £1.38.
But the real purpose of this is more serious. On very cold, very still days, it is a way of averting a worst-case scenario.
It's about avoiding blackouts for people who need the electricity. I'm not worried about the money, it's not about that. Thinking about the war days, they dug for England, they made do and mended. And if just switching the power off for 1 hour is a help to other people, then I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, so nothing to hurry, nothing to worry about the whole lag at the moment, nothing.
The scheme is the brainchild of the National Grid's electricity system operator, where they are responsible for keeping the lights on.
So when you try and initialise for stability, you get all of these errors, lots of them.
In the control room, they balance the system on a second-by-second basis. Amid a global energy crisis driven by the war in Ukraine, they need all the tools they can get.
Britain is a modern, rich, developed nation. Why are we asking consumers to turn the lights off to stop blackouts from happening?
It's an insurance policy. Our assessment for this winter was that there were a number of sort of risks that could arise, and in some scenarios we could foresee that we might have more challenging conditions than we've maybe had in recent years.
But in a world of intermittent renewables and smarter technology and appliances, the message from the grid is clear. Things are going to change for all of us.
Demand flexibility is going to be a really important component of our energy supply mix going forward, and it will grow and grow as something that we all get used to. Once we've got electric cars and we don't have gas boilers anymore, we're going to be using energy very differently to how we use it today. Consumers being able to shift their demand is likely how we're all going to operate in the future.
But before anyone thinks about the future, there is the crisis this winter to get through. And to do that, coal has become a last line of defence against blackouts. Drax, the UK's largest power station, burns wood pellets now. But recently the government requested that old coal units go on standby in case more electricity is needed in the coming months.
It is a bit strange to see coal coming back onto site, having cleared it all off-site, but we're able to here react to changing world, a war in Europe with Ukraine that wasn't predicted. That means that people like us, if we can provide that backup power, then that's what we're able to do here, and we're very pleased to be able to do it.
At the Ratcliffe coal-fired power station near Nottingham, they are also ready to boost supply.
Our power plants aren't weather dependent, and so we can ramp up and ramp down very quickly. We can respond to changing demand, and we play our role helping the National Grid electricity system operator to keep the lights on.
But that won't be the case forever. Coal is a polluting relic of the Industrial Revolution, and its era is almost over, phased out entirely by the end of next year. So what will fill the gap?
The role of gas is really important, and the role of providing large-scale flexibility will shift and will be picked up by gas-fired generation as we go forward in future years.
It is a fuel brought into sharp focus by the war in Ukraine and Vladimir Putin's throttling of supplies to Europe. The conflict proving how dangerous it can be to rely on foreign powers for energy. So far, though, the UK's supply has coped, flowing from the North Sea or shipped in on tankers, and that's a good thing, given how much depends on it.
Gas is an absolutely critical part of the UK's energy mix. Of course, a lot of us use it to heat our homes, but last year, for example, power stations like this one provided around 35% of the UK's electricity.
So this is the Turbine Hall.
Bill Cliff got his first job climbing pylons in the 1970s. Now he runs this plant in Enfield and responds daily to requests from the grid to help.
With the way the system is at the moment, it's incredibly volatile. We fill the gaps, we fill the peaks and the troughs because we're available, we're reliable and we're responsive.
Do you think that the British public know the ins and outs of what it takes to run this place?
I don't think so. But in all honesty, it's not a problem. We know our role. We have a deep sense of purpose, deep sense of meaning in what we do, and we're happy doing that. And the British public can be rest assured there are people in the power industry that is working in the background to keep the lights on today and to decarbonise tomorrow.
But some industry experts are much less confident. The rush to ditch fossil fuels, part of the problem.
We're running into a supply crisis in the middle of this decade. We have legislation in place that requires all the coal power stations to close by October 2024. There are also 2 of our remaining nuclear power stations scheduled to close in March 2024. So we have a situation where the winter after next, all of the spare capacity that we currently have, which is about 4 gigawatts as the spare capacity margin, that will have gone. There will not be that spare capacity margin anymore. So we need to replace that. And the only realistic way of doing that is to build gas power stations. Now, 2 years isn't really long enough to do that.
There are those who say hydrocarbons caused this mess, this energy security mess. The only way out of said mess is to get off fossil fuels faster, to accelerate into renewables. Is that a good argument, do you think?
It's a terrible argument, unless you're willing to go back to pre-industrial days. If you want people to sit and shiver in their houses in the dark in the winter, then great, go for it. But I don't think that's acceptable.
desks looking at all of those different variables that can influence that balance between supply and demand.
For CEO of E.ON, Michael Lewis, there is no room for negativity. He believes we need to get off fossil fuels as fast as possible, however difficult that may be.
This does require a huge national investment and a huge national effort, but if you look at what we did after the Second World War, we built the Central Electricity Generating Board, we electrified every home, we built the nuclear industry, we built a gas industry. It's that kind of effort that is required, and we did all that in 30 years after the war. We can do it again, and if we do it again, we've got the prize of net zero and a long-term robust energy system independent of fossil fuels, independent of international volatile gas prices.
The government says that it's now more important than ever to boost the UK's homegrown energy supply, highlighting its energy security strategy and its focus on renewables, nuclear and North Sea oil and gas. The lights have stayed on for the moment, but in a changing world, nothing is guaranteed.